Hi there, and welcome to Real Talk in ELT, a podcast about the reality of teaching English. I'm your host, Kelly Pennington. Thank you for joining me today. So, welcome back, everyone. Very excited for Vinicius to be here with me today. Hello, welcome.
Hello, Kelly. You can call me Vinny. Please call me Vinny. Vinicius makes it sound so formal.
Okay,
Feel free to call
sorry,
me Vinny.
Vinny.
No, it's
We're
absolutely fine.
friends. Now we're friends. Okay. Well, I do have to introduce you to everybody. So I will say Vinicius to be
That's okay.
proper because we tried to be semi professional here. So this is Vinicius Nobre. He's the Director of Education at CNA. He's a coursebook writer, a CELTA tutor, an assessor, a tutor for the MA at the University of Chichester. Is that the one at Nile? Is that
Yes,
Niles? Oh,
yes,
okay, cool.
that's the one.
A professor in post-graduation courses and has co-authored 3 reference books on ELT methodologies. Vinny, oh, now it's casual. Vinny is also the past president of Russ Teasel and a member of the advisory council for New Roots. New Roots, New Routes. I mean,
It's up to you. Yeah.
kind of. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for the invitation.
Of
It's
course.
such a great honor. And I've already told you this. Congratulations on the work you do and making
Oh,
sure
thank
that
you.
all this information, gets spread out and teachers have
Yeah.
access to, more insights. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like one of the things, I mean, this podcast is a product of the pandemic. It was kind of my pandemic baby. So I thought to myself that one thing that we were missing during the pandemic, because everybody migrated online, was we didn't have those chats in the hallway between your
Hmm. Hmm.
classes. You know, those like just kind of random casual chats where you're like, hey, I did this in my class and what was this? Or I read an article or I did something. And I was like, oh, that's what I should do. So then Real Talk in ELT was born.
Great, great
Yeah.
initiative.
Yeah. So, okay, we've got a lot of stuff on the agenda today. Let's see how much we can get through. We've got professional development, addressing possibilities in teacher education, and course design and how that all goes. We'll try. I
Okay.
don't know. We'll try. So, where do you want to start?
Well, I don't know. You can choose. I mean, you're the hostess,
No,
so pick
I
one.
actually any of them. I think a lot of people nowadays, especially because people are moving from working at schools and they're trying to be like the teacherpreneurs, like the I guess this is like a cliche term now too, like oh teacherpreneur, but it's kind of like okay, so you want to private teach. We have to worry about
Hmm.
things, professional development, teacher education, and course design. So maybe from that perspective, because there's a lots of people moving into the private sector.
I would actually say I think that yes, we can definitely start from there. But I would actually say that the interesting thing is that we have always assumed that these are areas of interest for someone who's starting their own business and who's flying solo. When in fact, what I advocate for is the idea that these are areas that every single teacher should be concerned about and should be
Yes.
interested in.
Yes. Oh, I
So,
didn't mean to diminish the people that
oh
are
no.
continuing schools. Yeah. No. It's fine. But it is a good point to make because a lot of people are moving away from it and it's the current trend. But that doesn't mean that people who continue their careers in schools and institutions don't need to be concerned about this.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
mean, God, I've had so many different roles. I've done so many different things, and I've worked by myself. I had my own company. I led institutions, and I think that one of the things that has allowed me to be so versatile, let's say, in my career, was the fact that I never kind of like saw myself as a one trick pony. I was always thinking about what I would have to develop if I ever wanted to do something different. So the issues that you raise are fascinating, and I think that my point is every teacher should embrace this because if one day they eventually decide to start their own business or teach privately, or maybe not, they won't have to face these issues when they decide to make the move. They will feel prepared to go come embrace new challenges. And one of the things that we see a lot, especially in Brazil, it is a characteristic of the teaching career overall, but especially in Brazil, one of the things that we see a lot is kind of like an encouragement. It's kind of like just assumed that teachers are not ambitious. So we're encouraged not to be ambitious. We are encouraged not to see ourselves as professionals who can, do different things and aim high and be rewarded financially for what we do. So in a way, there is this underlying principle that when we are developing ourselves professionally, we should be more concerned about learning, 10 activities for young learners or how to use songs in class. And at the end of the day, we're not really engaging in more complex and empowering conversations when it comes to building a career. So I think that whether we are working for a language center, teaching privately, studying at university, we should definitely allow ourselves to consider all of these issues. Teacher education, how do I design courses? Oh, but in my context I don't design courses. Yeah, but if you understand the rationale behind the course that was designed, this will also make you a better practitioner. And then if one day you are invited to design a course, you won't have to do all the catching up that most people have to do, because they are usually faced with the opportunity and then they realize the gaps, because they were never truly encouraged to be that autonomous, or that, I like the word ambitious, because I think that there is this idea that it's always negative, but I think that ambition is can be really positive, can be the fuel that moves us forward, and you can have the
Absolutely.
ambition
Absolutely.
to,
Yeah, it's not a
just
bad thing.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You can impact more lives, you can do more, you can do different things. These are all ambitions that we should have, and as teachers I think we should be more ambitious, and we should all be, studying a little bit more about teacher education. We should be studying a little bit more about course design. We should be studying a little bit more about, managerial aspects of our career. And I know it's hard because the world tells us otherwise. The world keeps telling us, oh, but you're only a teacher. Oh, no, you should not worry about this. And so sometimes we just end up believing these words, which I think is very negative. God, I've said so much and I never
No,
answered your question.
no, it's fine. I was listening. Actually, I got a lot of thoughts from that little piece there. So no, because I think there's a lot of people that focus a lot on the 10 activities, like you said, 10 activities for young learners, things like that. Because the day-to-day monotony of teaching, I mean, if we're honest, it is monotonous. We go into classes, we see the students, we usually are teaching similar or if not the same material over and over again. We want to just facilitate our lives a little bit and, or spice them up and have something new and interesting. But that doesn't make us a very well rounded professional. And so if you think about, well, let's do a little future planning. Where do I want to be in the future? What are my possibilities? What are my opportunities? Sometimes people don't even think about, like, well, what could I do in the future? What are the avenues? If you want to get into research, if you want to get into materials writing or course design, things like that. So there's a lot of different avenues. You start as a teacher, but you have to kind of grow and go beyond that. It's not saying everyone has to follow the same line, though. And I think we're influenced by lots of different things outside of our lives. Like I recently, I like podcasts, so I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I was thinking about someone said something, and I can't remember who, and I apologize, and I'm not
I do
plagiarizing.
that all the time.
I can't even remember the podcast it was on, but they were talking about really, and it was something unrelated to education, but really understanding the principles behind and the history behind what people are talking about nowadays. And I was like, ooh, this is interesting because I myself don't really know a lot of the principle. I mean, nobody knows everything, the principles and but also the history and like society behind education. So I was like, well, I'll just go back 3,000 years. And I started with the Greeks and the Romans and I started reading about it because I wanted to know, well, what was society like? What are the values in society? Because that's obviously shaping the education system in the minds of teachers. So then how does that translate to today? What are our values and I'm not saying we're lost, but I think maybe sometimes we get a little lost identifying like where are the things that we should be focusing on.
I think that in many contexts we are lost. I think that
I'm
a-
trying to be nice. Politically correct a little bit. I don't know.
well, okay, yeah, politically correct. I'll take that. Being nice is not necessarily a collocation that goes with my name. So I'm usually
Vinny.
I'm usually better known as the pragmatic one, the one who,
Got it.
who doesn't hesitate.
Yeah.
So I think we are lost actually. Not I'm not trying not to be nice, but it's just that I really think so. I think that as a society, we are, when it comes to education, we are lost in many contexts and in many ways. And one of the reasons why I think we are lost is because it's just interesting to make sure that educators and policymakers and people involved with education do not necessarily think critically and follow certain steps, because education is empowering. And if you think about the way that society has been built and the systems that are in place nowadays, if you think about them, you understand that for these ideas to be sustained, education cannot find its path towards success. So it is important that people remain a little lost. So and education is very, very complex. I had a professor who once said, and I love that quote: "Learning is a messy business. It's just messy, and we try to systematize it, we try to make it more structured, but it is messy. So I think it's just natural that we feel lost. And I think that the first step for us to start uh, um, structuring things better and having a clear direction and knowing what we're doing a little bit more as a society. I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not talking about individuals, but as a society, the first step for us to get out of this rut, get out of this habits that we've developed, and these insecurities that sometimes we don't accept, is to be aware of that. So I really like your hedging, but I'm just going to say we're lost. I think that we are lost. I think that
I
a
was
lot of people
trying.
know a lot, and
Yeah.
especially in Brazil when it comes to English language teaching, I think that Brazil has been at the forefront of English language teaching historically, for a number of reasons, and there are people who really know what they're doing, and there are beautiful projects out there. But as a society, when you think about the billions of people who need to learn something, or learn a language for that matter, um, what we are doing is very confusing. We have huge gaps in terms of the quality. We still have an assessment system that tries to rank people and tries to place people into little boxes, judging and simply evaluating, not for people's growth, but for to identify the talents and classify people. We still have an educational system that is very much focused on segregation, um, either because of the way the content is approached, or because of the way that groups are formed and classes are managed. There are many layers that encourage this gap, that they're not necessarily trying to bridge the social gap, but rather unconsciously emphasizing the gap. We are still very content oriented. We are not, developing skills and competencies, but rather expecting students to develop lower order thinking skills and memorize certain things. And again, I'm not talking about every single teacher, every single institution. I'm talking about
Yeah.
society as a whole.
We're
Um,
generalizing here. Please don't be offended.
exactly.
Yeah, but bringing awareness to it in general. Okay, so this is kind of the scenario that's happening. This is what's going on. I'm going to always hedge. So you, it's a good balance here. Kelly hedging, Vinny just whoop, straight to the point. Um, but so then my question for you would be, okay, so yeah, because I do agree with you. I think in general, it's gotten beyond what would be considerable control for me to be comfortable. So then how can we use, or how should say, how can we leverage the development, the education, the course design, these things to try and like guide people, like use them as guiding principles? Do you think that would be kind of the best way, or how
I
would
think
you?
I,
Mm.
I, I think that well, so it's a very, very interesting question. I think that
That's
um,
what I'm here for.
good job, Kelly. Good job.
Woo!
Uh, Let me see if I can address that, because I think
No,
that
it's
this is
fine. I mean, take a minute.
no, this is I think this is at the end of the day, this is the answer, right? So how can we as individuals or as teachers or as citizens, how can we make a relevant contribution so that this situation is changed? And I think that it's through a number of initiatives. So, first, I think the first thing that we need to understand, and I think this is probably the biggest change that I would like to see in teaching overall, is that teaching is the interplay that happens among the teacher, the student, and the resources. It is not the resources, and this is still a very, very, very strong paradigm. It is very, very much present. So, as an author, for example, I remember that once I was invited to write a book, and the school owner, director, president, whatever, turned to me and said, "Vinny, we need to write a book about critical thinking, because this is one of the skills of the century, and kids need to develop 21st century skills, and they need to develop critical thinking. But please just make sure that the material is teacher proof, that anyone who uses the material will follow exactly what they have to do, and that regardless of the teacher, the result will be the same." And for
Huh.
me, exactly, I'm like,
Is that your response? Because I would be like, okay.
exactly. I mean, what I didn't even know where to begin. I'm like, so you want to foster critical thinking in the kids by getting teachers not to think critically? How does that even work? And of course, this is an extreme example, even though it is a true example. It is quite extreme, but that's what happens. And sometimes we're not aware of this. We are still very much guided by the course book. We're still very much guided by the guidelines. And I think that one way for us to start changing this whole scenario is for teachers to be empowered to make informed decisions, because the pendulum can
That's
swing.
a very important thing that you said, though, informed decisions. And how do we get to the informed decisions is through teacher development and all of those things. So exactly.
And
So
then we
because
close the
and
cycle.
then we can move away from this structure that we're obviously having difficulties with because it's not producing the results that were anticipated. Obvious that this is not what we wanted, and we've got a society that's kind of like, people, one of the biggest, I'm a business English focused person, so one of the biggest things that I see, especially in companies, is like, we want soft skills, and we want people who can speak, other languages, but still have soft skills and communication and all of that good stuff. And I'm like, okay, but so we've had generations of people go through this system, right? And we've used all of the same materials up until now, and we haven't had that result. So if we continue to create things that are mirrors of what we already have, we're going to continue to produce the same results. So if we're going to focus on communication, we're going to focus on critical thinking skills, soft skills, like all of that type of stuff, then we have to change, because what we're doing is not producing those results. Those are not the desired outcomes. So how do we change that, right? And we have to, but
And
the people have to be informed. And that's very
absolutely.
important.
And at the same time, and this is one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle, when we are dealing with education, because of the stigma and all the burden that we have to carry about, you know, the importance and meaningfulness of teachers and educators, it is really difficult for us to have a voice as specialists. Because of that, we're probably one of the professions that has to deal the most with an external stakeholder, and having to please that stakeholder who just assumes that they know everything about what we do, and that would be the student or the family, or the company. In your case, for example, if it's the company that is hiring you, they will probably come up with a list of what you should do and how people learn a language.
Right.
Um,
It's
s-
it's awesome to see those.
so this is, I mean, wearing the hat of the manager, the director, the director of studies. What I can say is, because that's a question you might ask. So, Vinny, having been responsible for the academic program of large institutions in Brazil. What have you done? And I can say I have done very little. I have done very little because at the end of the day, there's just so much that society is willing to accept. I think that, I like to believe that I've done a lot under the circumstances, but I feel that I've done very little because if you change the assessment system, for example, you will just lose students. You'll have a riot. The amount of trouble that you're going to face is not going to pay off. So you need to make small changes, and you need to make small changes aligned with a lot of information. And that takes time. That takes time because at the end of the day, what we're doing is it's a twofold objective. We are educating our learners as far as using the English language is concerned and developing communication skills and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we do have a soft aim that is to develop their awareness and their understanding of the learning process so that they can better accept when we do things differently to get different results. But the thing is that the resistance that we find in students and in families is huge, and many times it's completely unconscious. It's not that they want to challenge you; it's just that they are afraid that if they do something different, things are not going to work. And because the teaching profession is overall undermined in certain cultures like Brazil, for example, and I know there's even that saying in English, like those who can do, those who can't teach. So it's not just Brazil, but there is this generalized feeling that being a teacher is a smaller thing. We are often intimidated or cornered by these successful professionals because if they are successful doctors and engineers and architects and accountants and whatever, they definitely know better than teachers. So and this conflict is endless. So going back to your question, I have a tendency to digress, as you can see, but going back to your question,
It's fine. We're chatting.
I think that it all starts with teacher education. It all starts with revisiting teacher education. Donald Freeman has a very interesting quote when he talks about the way that teacher education has developed historically. I'm not going to be able to quote him, literally, but the idea is that for many, 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 many years, teacher education has focused on developing activities and behaviors in class. And it was only in the 90s that teacher education started considering that teachers' beliefs and teachers' thinking process would actually uh, be more relevant and more important in the development process than the activities and the behaviors. So this is recent. If you think about it, back in the
It's
90s.
real. It's really it seems kind of obvious, but it's something that doesn't happen. I have a mentee mentorship program that I do, and it's so funny because with everyone, I don't care where you come from, what your education background is, I don't care. I always start with, what are your beliefs about second language acquisition? What are your beliefs about learning? What do you know about the history that led up to this point? And we talk about that because I think it's really important, because if I can bring my mentees, these teachers that are feeling, because one of the common things is like, am I doing this right? Are my classes successful? And I'm saying, well, no, are your classes aligned with your belief system? So let's talk about your belief system. Where did that come from? What methodologies? I know we're in the post method era, but all of those methodologies, whether you think you agree with them or not, and whether you think you apply them in your classes or not, because that is also controversial to say, well, I believe in
Absolutely.
this, but if that's not really what happens in your classes, then okay. But I go through this whole process with them, and it's usually quite enlightening for them. They feel a little better and they feel more confident as a teacher, and I'm like, okay, there, empowered you a little bit, so let's keep going with this. And then obviously we talk about other stuff, but that's where I start with them, because you have to know that stuff. You have to know
Absolutely.
who you are and
And
what you
then
believe.
And then I'm sure you
Mm.
do this as well. I mean, based on the little I know about your work, I can feel that you do this as well. The next step would be, okay, so now let's look at your decisions when you're teaching, and let's see how we can justify them, or maybe not justify them, and start rethinking these decisions. Because having worked with teacher education for so many years, I've learned that one of the most uncomfortable, awkward moments for teachers is when they are asked to justify what they're doing. And I've seen teachers react in the most diverse ways. There are teachers who, will
Oh
attack
no.
you. There are teachers
Oh yes.
who will start crying. There are teachers who will feel offended by that question.
Hmm.
There are teachers who are just going to get lost, and then we go back to being lost,
Hmm.
because a lot of what we do as teachers is unknown to us as teachers. There is interesting research about this. Teachers, get asked about why they did certain things, and they many times they didn't even notice that they did or said certain things in class. And one of the reasons why that happens is because teaching is one of the very few professions that when you get into the profession, you've already been exposed to hundreds of thousands of hours of a model. How often do you go to a doctor before you become a doctor? How often do you work with an architect before you become an architect? But how many hours do you witness a teacher in action before you become a teacher? So a lot of the things that we do that are unconscious to us are sometimes just mirroring what the way we were taught, and we are not even aware of that. And this is one of the biggest challenges in teacher education, and that's why we need to talk about awareness raising. We need to talk about justifying. We need to talk about going beyond the concrete activity, the recipes. And if there is one thing that just gives me a stroke every time I see on the internet,
Oh no.
but it's when people who are self-proclaimed teacher trainers start making promises like, oh no, this is what you do, this is the recipe for you to have a successful lesson, take my course and I'm going to give you the solution to this. Is so irresponsible, because that's not what teacher development is. That's not what education is. I can't give you a recipe. I can't tell you exactly what it is. I can't give you the solution, because you need to find it. And when you find it, you need to revisit it, because your students will be different and the world will be different. So instead of telling teachers what they don't want to hear, because that's the thing, right? What kind of marketing works? The marketing that will tell you exactly what you want to hear. So but the real job of the teacher educator is to destabilize teachers, is to make them feel that there is this term in teacher education theory, which is this destabilization. I can never say this word fast. Of professionals, because that's what ensures progress. When you are destabilized, you are looking at yourself, and you're getting to a healthy conflict, like, oh, this is what I've always done, this is what I used to think, oh. And then there is that feeling, oh, I need to change. And that's where development occurs. It
Right.
doesn't happen just because you have learned to use a new platform. This is not true development, because the platform is just like, a car. How do you develop as a driver? When you learn how to drive safely. And learning to drive and learning how to use a tool doesn't necessarily make you a good driver, because you can, tomorrow you can crash your car, you can run people over. And as a teacher, you can do the same thing with a platform, with a book. Hopefully you're not going to kill anyone, but you could definitely do a lot of harm.
Right. Yeah, for
So you need
sure.
to know what you're doing, and this level of reflection is hard to reach, and it's uncomfortable, and we need to get there.
Right. I think yeah, I mean, like put it in like simplest terms. And there's like the old adage of like, you have to go outside of your comfort zone, go outside, think outside of the box, that type of thing. And that's really, I don't think, yeah, I 100% agree. If anybody tells you they know the solution, they know how to do it, run. Go the other way. Like that is not a mentor, that is not a teacher trainer, that is not a professional that's actually invested in your development. That's a person that wants you to pay for their course. And every time I see that, I'm like, run away. And I always tell people, I'm like, I'm never going to tell you how to think, because while you and I agree on this, we might disagree on something else, which actually would be fantastic, because I would love to debate that with you, because I would love to have that conversation. Well, what experience did you have influence your practices or your ideas now? Because my experience is obviously different and biasing me towards another. And that's an interesting conversation to have. There's no one way about going about education. Like you said, teaching is messy. So all of these things that, that we want the fast and quick solution, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. We have to have like really icky conversations with people, and it makes you feel that way. It makes you feel a little, like tense and uncomfortable. But some of my best ELT professional friends are people that disagree with me.
Yeah, I think this is very,
Yes,
very, very
please.
helpful. But then we get to that, which is what we addressed before. We get to that very, very important feature of, healthy disagreements, which is, where exactly are you coming from? Is it just your opinion, or can you? Because I think that nowadays, not only are people disagreeing in a very rude way, completely, and you had. I mean, I actually left you a comment there. You have an amazing video about this. But people are just very aggressive and rude, and there is no debate. There is no dialogue. The conversation has died. But a lot of the arguments that are used are based on nothing, or just one's
Right.
meandering experience. So, oh, because I've seen this, I've heard about this, that's what I've always done. Um, and I feel that it's very, very important that if we want to be respected, that's something that I always say in my talks when I talk about professional development. Respect is not something that you demand; it's something that you earn. So if we want to be respected, we need to change the way we interact with the world. I mean. It's we can't simply say teachers are important. Well, we know teachers are important, but what are you doing to highlight your importance? If you and mind you, I know that there is a moment for everyone, and there is room for a lot of different levels of seniority. I'm not saying that everyone should be doing the same, but if you go to a conference, for example, and 99% of the talks that are there that should be fostering professional development, if 90% of those talks are based only on someone's experience, with no theoretical background, with no literature research, with no quotes, no citations, no nothing, it is very hard for us to say, please respect me, because a scientist cannot just stand up in a conference and say, listen, I like this. There's a whole methodology that has to be explained and detailed. So why is it that suddenly it became so common for us to have most of the workshops and seminars and sessions be developed without any kind of referencing? How what kind of message do we convey? How do we build a reputation of somebody who's a professional when you walk through the most respected conferences, ELT conferences, and what you usually see is good ideas, what happened in my. And you can do action research and classroom research. You can definitely talk about something that happened in your classroom, but how does that relate to theory? How does that relate to what other people have researched and have published and have? So this level of justification, this level of science needs to be reached, right? And when I work with new teacher trainers or people who are interested in teacher training, the first thing that I ask them is, who said that? Based on what? And it's very interesting to see how that question comes as a surprise. Like, oh, and it never occurred to you that you're going to be training teachers, you're going to be telling teachers, how they can develop professionally, and you're going to be fostering professional development. Never occurred to you that it cannot be based only on what you think. We need to read more, we need to quote more. Call me old fashioned, but I think that this is how solid knowledge is built. And for some weird reason, actually, Hall and Simmerall, they have an amazing book in which they analyze teacher development, and they talk about effective teaching. Um, and one of the things that they say is that ironically, teachers are belong to a group, a profession that tends to resist the most after extensive research. They learned that teachers belong to a professional group that tends to resist the most the process of learning. So it is a fact.
Awesome. Great. That's a great fact.
And it's very ironic, right? That's what they say
Oh
in the book, actually. They
gosh.
say, and it's just ironic when the core of what we do is
Oh
relies on teaching and learning.
no. That's so
Um,
depressing.
it is, and they carried out research not only with language teachers. So I'm not saying that this is something that is exclusive to our group, but to teachers in general. Um, and I think it's just it concerns me. I
No,
think
yeah, it is concerning. So then, because I know that you have, we have some time limits here today with Vinny's.
sorry.
No, 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 no. I want to make sure that I get all the last nuggets of knowledge that you have for us. So then, what would be your personal recommendations for people who are trying? They're just because people do feel lost. Like, what do you do? Especially if you're working in a school that maybe doesn't have professional development. Like, where do people go? What would be your recommendations?
Okay, I can tell from experience.
I
Um,
like putting you on the spot.
I enjoy that. Uh, I can tell from experience, at least for me, what has always worked is not to expect anything from anyone. I'm not saying that organizations and schools should not be responsible. That's a completely different thing. But you need to think locally. You need to think about yourself. And I see a lot of teachers kind of like just waiting for something to happen and waiting for the school or the organization to guide them and to offer them a course or to suggest something. Don't wait for anybody to take responsibility for your own professional development. So always do a little bit more. Oh, but and sometimes I hear things that are very frustrating. Like, oh yeah, but why am I going to take this certificate? Am I going to get a raise? Well, if you start the whole process by thinking that you will only do something to get a raise, that's probably not even going to happen because you
Yeah,
have a bigger issue, which is your attitude. So the
right.
certificate's not going to be any good. But do it for yourself. So whether you are, I'll give you a simple example. When I started teaching, and I didn't really know what I was doing, I just had this urge to see if I was being effective. See, I've always been a little bit of a high achiever, so I wanted to be a good teacher. I
I
didn't
don't
even
get that from your personality, a high achiever. Continue.
surprise.
Shocking.
So I was always curious, like, because I had just started teaching. I didn't necessarily think I was going to be a teacher at that time. I thought that I was just teaching for a couple of years and that would be it, but still I wanted to do it well. So I would always invite people to come and observe my lessons, always. Coordinators, colleagues, I would say, can you observe me and let me know? And people would always look at me like, are you insane? We hate classroom observation. Why are you inviting people to go there when we actually hate it when it's mandatory?
It's like,
You're
please, can you stress me out just a little bit?
absolutely. And I'm like, well, I know it's not the most comfortable thing in the whole world, but the feedback that I get is so amazing because people who come to my class, they see things that I'm completely oblivious to. So please come to my class. I have this coordinator which was one of my very first coordinators, and we're friends nowadays. And I was very young back then. She was a little more experienced, and she always tells me, Vinny, you were like this very eager teenager who would always come to me, and you were the only one. You would always come to me and say, can you please observe me? And I would roll my eyes and say, okay, fine, again. And I didn't understand why you want, but now I can see why you did it. And I actually had the opportunity to witness how much you changed because of these observations, because they were very I mean, I'm mentioning peer observations or classroom observations in general as one example, but I think that it's always, having this energy to do it for yourself without expecting something in return, just because you want to do it better, because you owe this to your students, because you want to I can't say you do, but I want to be remembered when I stop working or when I'm not around anymore. I want people to say he was an amazing teacher and he made a difference. And for me to feel that this is the kind of legacy that I'm going to leave behind, I have to push myself, and I can't wait for anybody to do it on my behalf. So I think this is the best advice I can give to people out there. Don't wait for anyone to invite you. Don't wait for anyone to suggest something, and make sure. Oh, this is very important too. It's not advice people usually dispense, but I think it's very
Oh,
important
here
to
we go. Nuggets. I said nuggets of knowledge from Vinny. Here we go. What do we have?
make sure you hang out with the right people. And sometimes the right people are not the ones who are going to validate you. Sometimes the right people are the ones who are going to make you feel a little uncomfortable. Because I think that um, it's sometimes it's just reassuring to be surrounded by people who think like, just like you said, who people who think like you, who love you, who think that you're wonderful, and who say exactly what you want to hear, and it's just very comfortable and reassuring. And but at the end of the day, you know try to connect with people who who have achieved a lot, people who are good role models, and who may not say everything that you want to hear, who may not validate you all the time. And because as you said it yourself, and I'm just quoting Pennington 2022, these are the people who are truly concerned about your development, because there's no development in if you're continuously validated by what you already know and what you already do. You need somebody to shake your world a little bit. So choose your gang wisely, and
Yeah.
listen to them, even when
There-
they say something that
You
you
don't
may not
like.
like very much.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
But then it's like, well, why don't I like that? You can have that internal, you don't have to necessarily engage with it, but you can have that internal reflection like, well, why did I have that reaction to that? And what was my justification? And should I double down on what I think, or should I be open to this new possibility? There's a great saying that says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it. You gotta find a tribe that challenges you. So
Absolutely.
amazing. Any last little wisdom, tips, knowledge that you want to share with us, or do you think you've exhausted it all for today?
I just want to thank all the teachers out there, everyone who is doing a great job. I demand a lot. I demand high. There's actually a very interesting philosophy by Adrian Underhill and Jim Scrivener, demand
Sooner,
high.
yes, yes. Please search that. I don't know why that's not exploding. I love that whole idea. Demand high.
And I think that we should be demanding high as teachers
Mhm.
as well. We should be using demand high for ourselves. And I'm kind of like in this dimension of the demand high principle. But I do appreciate the huge efforts that teachers make out there. Throughout my 28 years in teaching, I've had the opportunity to meet some outstanding professionals. And I think that what we do is, I mean, is the one thing that can change the world. And if we can have the difficult conversations to change the world a little bit more and make this a better place for everyone, we should be having these conversations. And we should really look at ourselves as catalysts, and not just technicians and uh, people who reproduce games and tasks and guidelines from a book.
Great. Well, perfect. I mean, I think that's kind of the wonderful wrapping up point for us. I want to thank you again for sharing a little bit of your morning with me. Hopefully, people got a lot of insights. I know that I did. And then maybe at some point, when I feel courageous enough, I'll ask you to debate on something.
Absolutely.
But you're always welcome back, Vinny. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ready to join the conversation? Head on over to Instagram at Real Talk and ELT Pod. or at Kelly Pennington ELT and send me a message. That's it for me. Take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.